everyone, welcome to our podcast. My name is Sophia.
And I'm Mason. We're super excited today because we're going to talk about something very practical and useful, taking someone to the airport. You might think, that's such a common thing. Why talk about it? But really, there are so many expressions, phrases, and tips we can learn from this situation that are perfect for upper intermediate and advanced English learners.
Exactly. Whether you're the one being taken to the airport or you're driving someone there are plenty of chances to use interesting vocabulary and expressions. I think the airport is a place full of emotions. You know, it can be exciting, it can be sad, it can be stressful. Don't you think, Mason?
Totally. I mean, think about it. Whether you're saying goodbye to someone who's going on a long trip or picking up someone who's been away for a while, it's always an emotional roller coaster. And with that comes some useful English phrases. Let's dive into it.
Yeah, so when you're talking about taking someone to the airport, the first thing that comes to mind is usually what time do we need to leave? Or when should we leave for the airport, right?
Absolutely. This is a very important question because airports are busy places and you never want to be late. So, phrases like we're gonna need to leave by 8 a.m. or we should head out around 2 hours before the flight are very common.
Yes, and notice how we say gonna instead of going to in casual conversation. It's a more relaxed way of speaking. So instead of saying, we are going to leave at 8, you could say, we're gonna leave at 8. It makes you sound more natural, don't you think?
Exactly. Gonna is something native speakers use all the time. It's informal, but it makes your speech sound smoother. Another thing people often say is, are we all packed and ready to go? Or do you have everything? You know, last-minute checks.
Yes, and that's when people start asking things like, did you remember your passport? Or do you have your boarding pass? Because those are the most important things for an international flight. If you're taking someone to the airport, you're going to ask them these questions, right?
Definitely. And sometimes, when people are in a rush, they might say, let's go, we don't want to miss the flight. Or even, we're cutting it close, meaning you're almost out of time.
Right, cutting it close is a great phrase. It means you're just barely going to make it, almost late. It's something people say when they're nervous about time. For example, we're cutting it close, we should leave now.
And once you're in the car, you might hear someone say, how's the traffic? Or is there any traffic on the way? It's important because traffic can make a huge difference in how long it takes to get to the airport.
Exactly. And you could also hear things like, is there a faster route? Or should we take the highway or back roads? These are common ways to ask about the best way to get to the airport. It's all about making sure you get there on time.
And speaking of time, when you're driving, people often talk about how early or late they're arriving. You might say, we're getting there with plenty of time if you're early. Or, if you're worried, you might say, we're running a bit late.
Yes, and then, as you get closer to the airport, there's the question of where to drop the person off. You might ask, should I drop you off at departures, or do you want me to park? Most of the time, people just get dropped off at the departures area. It's quicker.
Right, and then there are phrases like I'll drop you off at the curb, meaning the side of the road where people can quickly get out of the car, or do you want me to come in with you? If the driver offers to help you inside the airport.
Exactly, and once you arrive, there's that moment where you say goodbye. People usually say things like safe travels, or have a great trip, and maybe even text me when you get there. It's a common way to say you want to know they've arrived safely.
Oh, I hear that all the time. Or sometimes people say, call me when you land or let me know if you need anything. It's nice because it shows you care. Also, some people are a bit more emotional, right? They might say, I'm going to miss you, especially if it's a long trip.
Yes, that's a sweet one. I'm going to miss you, and the person who's traveling might respond with something like, I'll miss you too, or I'll see you soon. It's always good to stay positive.
And don't forget the hugs, of course. People might say, "Give me a hug before you go," or "one last hug." It's all part of that emotional airport experience.
Definitely. And finally, the traveler might say something like, "I better get going," or "I should head inside to wrap up the conversation and start heading to the check-in counter."
Exactly. The airport is such a rich environment for practicing your English. You're not just saying goodbye, there's so much useful language packed into this simple situation.
And it's all about real-life phrases, things you can use when you travel or take someone to the airport. These are all phrases that will make your English sound more natural and fluent.
And we're just getting started with all the language you can use around airports. There's still so much more to explore, but we'll keep the conversation going.
Right, so as Mason was saying, there's still a lot more to talk about when it comes to airports. One thing we haven't touched on yet is the check-in process. After you drop someone off, or if you're the one traveling, the next step is usually checking in for your flight.
Exactly. When you check in, you can either do it online, which most people prefer nowadays, or you go to the counter. If you're at the counter, you might hear things like, "Do you have any bags to check in?" Or "How many bags are you checking?"
Yes, and this is where you need to know the difference between carry-on luggage and checked luggage. Your carry-on is the smaller bag you take with you on the plane, while checked luggage is the bigger suitcase that goes underneath in the plane's cargo. So if they ask, "Are you checking any bags?" they're asking if you have luggage that you won't keep with you during the flight.
Right, and that leads us to another important phrase. Do you have any liquids in your carry-on? This is because there are limits to how much liquid you can bring in your hand luggage, so you might hear that when you're going through security as well.
Oh yes, the security check. That's another part of the airport where you'll hear specific language. For example, at security, they might ask you to remove your shoes or take out your laptop. These are typical requests when you're preparing to go through the scanner.
And they might say something like, "Please empty your pockets or place all your items in the tray." It's important to listen carefully because airports have different rules in different countries. So knowing these phrases helps you navigate smoothly.
Absolutely. Once you're through security, you'll probably want to find your gate. Now at this point, if you're early, you might hear or say things like, "We've got some time to kill," or "Let's grab a coffee before the flight." These are casual ways to say you have extra time before boarding.
Yeah, and time to kill just means extra time to relax or do something while waiting. So, if you're with someone, they might suggest, "Let's walk around," or "Let's check out the shops." Airports usually have a lot of things to see and do, especially if you're there early.
Exactly. Another common phrase when you're waiting at the gate is, "What time is boarding?" Or "When do we start boarding?" You might also hear, "Boarding begins in 30 minutes," or "Final call for boarding." The airport announcements will usually tell you when to head to the gate.
Yes, final call is important. It means it's your last chance to board the plane before they close the gate. So you never want to miss that. If you hear "Final call for flight 123 to New York," you should hurry up and get to the gate.
Exactly. And this is also where phrases like "We should head to the gate" or "Let's start boarding" come into play. It's all about knowing when to move, especially if you're traveling with someone. You might hear someone say, "Let's get in line," which means it's time to queue up for boarding.
Oh, and during boarding, the airline staff might say, "Please have your boarding pass ready," or "Have your passport ready." These are essential documents for international travel, so it's good to always keep them handy when you're getting ready to board.
Yes, and once you board the plane, there's the whole process of finding your seat. Common phrases you'll hear are "What's your seat number?" or "Can I help you find your seat?" If you need assistance, the flight attendants are usually really helpful.
That's right, and you'll probably hear announcements like, "Please store your bags in the overhead compartment," or "Put your smaller items under the seat in front of you." These are standard instructions for how to stow your belongings on the plane.
And don't forget the classic, "Please fasten your seatbelt." You'll hear that one multiple times when you take off, land, and whenever there's turbulence. It's one of those safety instructions that everyone needs to follow.
Oh yeah, turbulence. That's when the plane shakes a little bit because of air pressure or weather. You might hear the captain say, "We're experiencing some turbulence. Please stay seated with your seatbelt fastened."
Exactly. It's one of those things that can make people nervous, but it's totally normal. So you can reassure someone by saying, "Don't worry, it's just turbulence or it'll be over soon. It's all part of flying, and staying calm is key."
Definitely. Once the flight is underway, you might hear announcements like, "The flight attendants will be coming around with refreshments or will be serving drinks and snacks shortly." It's all about making the flight as comfortable as possible.
And speaking of comfort, if you're not feeling well or you need something during the flight, you can ask for help. You can say, "Excuse me, can I get some water? Or can I have a blanket, please?" The flight attendants are there to assist with anything you need.
Exactly. Whether it's a blanket, a pillow, or even earphones, don't hesitate to ask. People often forget that flight attendants are there to help make your journey smoother.
And by now, we've covered so much ground on taking someone to the airport, going through check-in, security, and even getting on the plane. But there's still so much more we can talk about when it comes to traveling.
Right, exactly, Sophia. So, once you're settled on the plane and the flight is underway, there's still a lot happening during the journey that we can dive into. For example, after the initial announcements and when the plane reaches cruising altitude, you might notice the lights dim, and that's usually when the flight attendants start serving meals or drinks. A typical phrase you'll hear is, "Would you like something to drink?" Or, "Would you like chicken or pasta for dinner?"
Yes, that's such a common one. And if you're not in the mood to eat, you can simply say, "No, thank you," or "Just water, please." It's always good to know how to politely accept or decline something on a flight, especially when you're feeling tired or just want to relax.
Exactly. And another thing to keep in mind during longer flights is getting comfortable. People might ask for items like, "Can I get an eye mask?" or "Do you have any earplugs?" These can really make a difference, especially if you want to get some sleep during the flight.
Definitely. And let's not forget about the entertainment. Many flights offer movies, music, or even Wi-Fi. So you might hear, "How do I connect to the Wi-Fi?" or "Can I get some headphones?" It's all part of keeping yourself entertained on long journeys.
Right, and while you're relaxing or watching a movie, you might also hear the captain or flight attendants make additional announcements. They'll say things like, "We're beginning our descent into," or "We'll be landing in about 30 minutes. That's when you know your trip is coming to an end, and it's time to start preparing for landing.
Exactly. And once you hear that, it's also a good idea to start gathering your belongings. You'll probably hear something like, "Please stow your tray tables and return your seats to their upright positions." This means you should tidy up your area and get ready for the plane to land.
Yes, and don't forget to buckle up again when you hear, "Please fasten your seatbelts for landing." It's one of those things you hear several times during the flight. But it's really important, especially during takeoff and landing when there's more movement.
And once the plane lands, there's usually a sense of relief, right? But the journey's not over just yet. You'll hear the final announcements like, "Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off," or "Welcome to," followed by the name of the city you've just landed in.
Yes. And even though everyone's eager to get off the plane, you'll often hear, "Please be careful when opening the overhead bins, as items may have shifted during the flight." It's good advice because things can move around during the flight, and you definitely don't want anything falling on you or others.
Right, that's a great point. And once you're off the plane, if you're traveling internationally, the next step is usually customs or passport control. Here, you might hear questions like, "What's the purpose of your visit?" or "How long will you be staying?" These are standard questions to ensure everything is in order before you enter the country.
Yes, and this is where it's really important to stay calm and answer clearly. You can say, I'm here on vacation or I'm staying for 2 weeks. It's simple, but having the right phrases ready makes the process much smoother.
Absolutely, and after passport control, you'll probably head to baggage claim if you've checked luggage. You'll hear things like, please proceed to baggage claim, or baggage for flight 1 to 3 is now available on carousel number 5. It's all about following the signs and listening to announcements at this point.
Right, and this is where things can get a little tricky if it's a busy airport. People often say, where's the baggage claim area, or which carousel is ours? But once you find your bags, it's a relief, especially after a long flight.
Exactly. And after you've collected your luggage, the final step is usually heading out to meet whoever's picking you up. Or if you're taking public transportation, you might ask, where's the taxi stand? Or how do I get to the train station from here?
Yes, that's where all those airport signs come in handy. And depending on where you are, you might also hear someone say, let's grab an Uber or we should take a shuttle bus to the hotel. Knowing these phrases can really help you navigate the last part of your journey.
Right, and once you've made it through all that the flight, customs, baggage claim, you're finally ready to get on with your trip, whether it's for business or leisure. It's always a good feeling when everything goes smoothly, right?
Definitely. After all the stress of getting to the airport, going through security, and boarding the flight, it's such a relief to know you've arrived safely and can start enjoying your time. And honestly, the key to making the airport experience smoother is being prepared with the right language and knowing what to expect.
Exactly. It's about feeling confident when you're traveling, especially if English isn't your first language. Knowing what phrases to use and understanding the common procedures makes such a difference.
You're so right, Sophia. Being prepared can really transform the travel experience, especially when it comes to navigating through all those different stages at the airport. I mean, after all the planning and anticipation for a trip, the last thing anyone wants is to feel stressed or confused when they're traveling. And when you understand the key phrases and what's expected, it all becomes so much smoother.
Absolutely, Mason. Whether you're asking for directions, talking to the airline staff, or simply following instructions on signs or announcements, having that basic confidence in your language skills can make a world of difference. It takes away so much of the anxiety that can come with being in a foreign environment, right?
Exactly. And let's not forget about the unexpected things that can happen when you're at the airport, like delayed flights or changes to your plans. Even in those moments, knowing how to ask for help is crucial. Things like, where can I get more information about my flight? Or can I reschedule for a different flight? Are really useful when things don't go as planned?
Yes, and speaking of delays or changes, airports often have announcements for updates. You might hear something like, your flight has been delayed, or we're currently experiencing technical issues. These announcements can be stressful, but knowing how to respond or where to go for more information makes all the difference.
Exactly. And sometimes, when your flight is delayed or if you miss a connection, you might need to spend extra time in the airport. In those situations, being able to ask questions like, where's the nearest hotel? Or can I get a meal voucher can help make the experience a bit more comfortable.
Right, it's all about staying calm and knowing how to handle the situation. If you're prepared with the right language, it's easier to find solutions quickly and efficiently. And let's not forget, airports are often equipped with helpful staff who are used to these kinds of situations, so don't hesitate to ask for help when needed.
Yes, and that's a great point, Sophia. In an airport, you're rarely alone. There's always someone to assist you, whether it's finding your gate, helping with your luggage, or directing you to the right terminal. Even if you're a bit nervous, just having those basic phrases in your mind can make it much easier to approach someone for help.
Exactly. And sometimes, just asking a fellow traveler can be helpful too.
That's a great point. And when you've made it through all the airport chaos and you're finally on your way to your destination, there's this huge sense of accomplishment. Like, you did it, you navigated everything, and now it's time to relax and enjoy your trip. It's a reminder that even though airports can be stressful, they're just one part of the journey, and getting through them smoothly sets you up for the rest of your trip.
Absolutely. It's all about mindset too. Once you understand the process and know what to expect, you'll feel much more at ease, whether you're taking a short domestic flight or a long international one. And really, after a while, it just becomes second nature.
Exactly. And for those learning English, it's even more empowering. When you know you can handle these situations with the right phrases and vocabulary, it makes traveling an exciting experience, not something to worry about.
Yes, and that's what it's all about, enjoying the journey, not just the destination. Whether you're learning English to travel more comfortably or just to feel more confident in everyday situations, it's these little moments, like navigating an airport, that make a big difference.
Absolutely, Sophia. So, to everyone listening, we hope this podcast has helped you feel more prepared and confident for your next trip to the airport. Remember, it's all about taking things step by step, listening carefully to announcements, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Exactly. The more you practice these phrases and understand the process, the more natural it will feel. Traveling can be stressful, but with the right preparation, you can make it a smooth and enjoyable experience.
Thanks for joining us today, and we really hope you found this episode helpful. Whether you're about to take your next trip or just practicing your English, we're glad we could be part of your journey.
Yes, thank you so much for tuning in. We've had a great time sharing these tips and talking about all things related to airports and travel. We hope you're feeling ready and excited for your next adventure.
Take care, everyone, and safe travels.
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.